Okay. All right. Well, welcome everyone tonight. This is an Explore Night, and on Explore Nights, we look at different topics relating to faith, what does the Bible teach us, and things like that. And we've done some fascinating stuff on that. And I decided to tackle, because one of the questions that came up in our discussions is, what is the Trinity? And so I decided to tackle that. And I'll tell you, I am not a theologian. I have no special training in this, and I just tried to wrap my head around it. And frankly, I got a little bit more confused. But I'm hoping that I can help make some sense of it and get us to kind of look at it in a new way. Now, I do have a background in history, so I'm going to be talking about a lot of historical stuff. So sorry if I'm going to get my geek on a little bit, but we'll do that. Okay, so what is the Trinity? So if you've grown up in a liturgical church, you probably said the various creeds, or maybe you just know, yeah, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And that's pretty basic. But the Trinity, the doctrine of the Trinity, is a little bit more than that, because it's not just about who is in the Trinity, but it's how they relate to each other. So next slide. All right. What this means, as we call it today, at the creeds that have been established, is that that all three parts, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, are equally God and all have the same power, and they're three in one. Now, I don't know about you, but is your head spinning yet a little bit? Okay, it doesn't make logical sense. Logically, three cannot equal one. And that's what the mystery of the Trinity is. And so can this idea really be understood? And so that's what we're going to kind of explore tonight and wrap our head around it. Next slide. All right. First of all, many of us say, does it appear in the Bible? And the short answer is no, not really. Doctrine doesn't. But it doesn't say anywhere that they're equal in substance and that there's three beings in one God. Now, there is one part of the Bible where it says that about in 1 John 5 verses 7 through 8. It comes closest. But it's very interesting when you read different translations. So if you go to the King James version of it, it reads that yes, they were three in one. And it was actually found out when they've done the biblical scholarship and gotten older and older manuscripts of it, to find out that that wasn't really in the original Greek manuscripts that they found from the early period. That was actually added in about 1,000 years later. So it's kind of interesting. So I would encourage you to use like the King James version or the New King James version and compare that with the NIV or the NSRV to see the difference in how it reads. And it's very clear. It's very clear in the newer translations, which are based on older works, that it doesn't really say that. So, all right, next slide. So how did this doctrine come about? Why do we say that it is this? And really, it came about to answer a theological question. If there's only one God, how do we reconcile the claims of Jesus' divinity that are in the Bible, and those are very clearly there, and the presence of the Holy Spirit, which we find in various places? So that idea of the Trinity is found in the Bible, but the doctrine is not. So really, the doctrine was formed, and this is the geeky part of it, to ease the tension of the Judaic claims of monotheism with the gospel claims of Jesus and the other New Testament writers concerning Jesus and the Holy Spirit. So how do you reconcile this? So they had to come up with some kind of doctrine to make these things make sense. Good luck. Next slide. All right. So, is this really important? I'm sure, I don't know about you, but I certainly don't think about this every single day. Like, about that. It makes me go on in my life, and how do I move forward in my life with that? And probably it wasn't the average people back in the early days of Christianity didn't think much about it either. They thought more about the questions that we talk a lot about following Jesus and how can we do that, as opposed to what is the nature of God. But the thinkers and the church fathers, and I want to say mothers too, but of course women's history often gets erased, so we'll say the church founders, whatever, decided that it was an important thing, and there were lots of different opinions. And today we would call many of those opinions, other than that, heresies. Heresies. Next slide. All right. So the different ideas of the early church was, well, one was that Jesus and the Holy Spirit weren't really God, that it was a metaphorical language to explain that. And they were like, nah, that can't be. It was real. Jesus said he was God. He and the Father were one. So then the next one was Christ was God because God made him a God. He elevated him to a God, so he wasn't equal. That's called subordinationism. So it was God the Father created God the Son and therefore raised him up to be a God, so there was that inequality in there. And then there was modalism. It refers to God in three different modes or roles. So a great example of this would be, I don't have children, but let's take Leslie, for example. Leslie's a mom. Okay, Leslie's also a daughter. And do you have nieces and nephews? I do. So you are also an aunt. So she has three different modes or roles in her life, and of course many more. But in that way, she says that. So when we look at the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, they said it's that. Then, so it's like, oh, one God is cap, and then today I'm going to put this cap on, I'm going to put the Son cap on, and then I'm going to put the Holy Spirit cap on. So that was another kind of way to doing it. So by the 2nd century, most agreed that Christ was God. So that first thing kind of went away. But it was their relationship that needed to be defined. And then the Holy Spirit was kind of an afterthought. It was really the relationship between God the Father and God the Son. Okay, next slide, Jason. So at least my picture came in. My presentation got a little bit messed up, but I got my picture in here. So how did the current doctrine come about? So this is a picture of Tertullian, one of the early church fathers. If you're like a history geek like me, you'll like look into that. Ooh, what is this? Who is this? Who thought this? But the idea started in about the 2nd century, where he kind of had this idea that there were the three in one, and they were all co-equal. And so this debate was going around and going back and forth in that. Now there was another, in addition to these other things, and the next one slide kind of goes here, is Arianism was kind of the other main thing that was being proposed. So Arianism basically stated that Christ was created by the Father, therefore, just like the other example, he wasn't co-eternal or co-substantial to do that. So again, he was subordinate to God the Father. And so, as often happens through history, the church became part of the empire. And Constantine took over, if you're familiar with that history, and basically adopted Christianity as the state religion. So Constantine was kind of like, you guys are fighting too much over this stuff, these different things. And he's like, I need you all to call a council and get together and figure it out. So basically, they called the Council of Nicaea. This was the first of the main councils that determined the nature of God. It was not the only one, because later on the Holy Spirit kind of got added in there. But it was this. So these church fathers got together. They traveled to Rome. Well, actually, it was Constantinople at the time. And they all got together, and they probably met in Nicaea. That's probably why it was there. But I didn't look that part up of it. But they got together and they said, let's debate this. Let's talk about this. So these people got together, and most likely they were speaking Greek at the time, as that was still the common language of the empire. And they basically decided to come together with the current doctrine. So As I said earlier, it wasn't settled once and for all. There was a problem in the early church that, and for instance, Constantine's successor, his son, was an Arian. He followed Arianism, so they reverted to that. And it was back and forth depending on whatever doctrine the emperor at the time believed. And finally, about the end of the 5th century is when they got it together and just were like, nope, okay, we decided it's going to be this. But it's kind of interesting because even after that was established, even later on in the church, so there was the splitting of the Eastern Orthodox churches from the Church of Rome. And it had less to do with authority of the Pope, although that was an issue. It had to do with, does the Son proceed from the Father? What does that even mean? I looked it up and I read it and I'm just like, huh? And I read it and I said, Googled, proceed in plain language. I still don't understand it, but I basically think that it means that, and then the Holy Spirit comes in later, and it's like, well, so I say all that. There were all these divisions, and there's still things. And we talk about our, some other of our friends, or maybe who may be Mormon or who might be Jehovah's Witnesses, and they don't believe in the Trinity at all. Or actually, Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormons believe kind of something very different. But it's, again, it's all these different ideas. And so the heresies keep coming up. Now, the next slide. So this is kind of what is the Trinity. So I really like this picture. And I'm gonna, before we kind of look at the God portion of it, think of it as water. And this may be modalism a little bit, but if we put water and we say H2O, the chemical compound of it, and we say water is H2O, but water is not ice, and water is not steam. Steam is H2O, but it is not water and it is not ice. And then ice is H2O, but it is not that. So it's a way to explain it, but what that lacks is the relationship between them. So 3 beings in one. So when Jesus was on earth, Jesus could talk to God the Father, could pray to God the Father. Jesus could ask for the Holy Spirit to come down. He was filled with the Spirit. And we see that kind of thing. So they're the same, yet they're different, and they all can have the same power. Again, very confusing, very very like, how can I wrap my head around this? And this is the best description that I can get from that. And it still does no justice when we talk about practicality of it. All right, so how can we relate to it today? And really, do the theological nuances really matter as we move forward? In our daily lives, I don't think that they do. It's just like, what are we going to do? And I go back to God's greatest commandment: love God and love people. If I'm doing that, to me, it doesn't matter exactly what I think. Am I in right belief? I'm going to say, all right, y'all know better than me, the theologians and church fathers and everything. I'll say, okay, fine, I'll let it go. I'm still following what that means. But I think of it like this. If I have to think about it a little bit at all, God the Father to me is the creator of the earth. God the Son, Jesus Christ, came to show us how to be human. The new age showed us the way we're supposed to live and supposed to relate to the world around us. And then the Holy Spirit came at Pentecost, and the Holy Spirit, for me, is that voice, that small, still voice that sometimes tells me, oh, don't do that, or sometimes tells me, you need to do that. It moves me in ways to do that if I am trying to connect with God through prayer and meditation and pondering and all that kind of stuff. If I can, so that I can listen to that Holy Spirit. If I can listen to what is said in the Bible about the Holy Spirit, and I say I'm going to make a connection to that Spirit, that's where it is today. So that's how I think of it. Again, that is my opinion, nothing more, nothing less. I just wanted to present this information today. Again, I hope it doesn't muddle the waters, but I hope it gives some ideas of things that happen, and realize that it's a very complex topic and there are no easy answers for us. But the way I explained it, how I think, that's how it helps me to live and to apply it to what I need to do on a day-to-day basis. So, and then forget all the theological stuff for somebody else. Let people who are, you know, better than I am, or maybe more educated than I am, worry about those things. I'm just trying to live and be a good person. So that's how I think of the Trinity, and I hope that this has helped to maybe possibly clarify some understanding. So thank you.